Everybody likes a cameo in pro wrestling. The thing is, wrestling has been going so long, sometimes an individual does pop up on your TV, and you're like, where the hell have you been? This is another reason I'm happy AEW does exist, because I tell you, every now and then they have pulled this out of their tuchus, and it makes me a happy and sometimes confused panda. So I am Simon Miller, thank you for joining me, and here is 10 completely random cameos in AEW. Number 10, Rico Constantino. Now actually, if you did watch the pre-show of WrestleDream 2024, you could put this puzzle together. It was indeed 2 + 2 = 4. Because the MXM collection were indeed feuding with the Acclaimed, and of course one member of the Acclaimed is the big old jacked father, Billy Gunn. You can also call him Daddy Ass. Now, if you were going to jump in a time machine and go back to the early 2000s, you would have seen Billy Gunn teaming with Chuck Palumbo, and their manager was none other than Rico Constantino. Therefore, Mansoor and Mason Madden decided we can get in our opponents' heads here, and they went and got Rico. And then, yes, of course, he fell out with Billy Gunn, who beat him up. Not a nice way to treat somebody you haven't seen in years. That was the real surprise though, because I don't think anybody expected Constantino to be on a pay-per-view in 2024. That's why I thought it was brilliant. The man is also in his 60s, and look how good he looks. This made me feel warm and fuzzy in my tum-tum. If nothing else, I always did find him entertaining, and people like this deserve to get their due. They put in as much time as anybody else. So if anybody from AEW is listening, if you want to pour more of these out of a hat, then please do. I will be a happy man. Number 9, Eric Redbeard. One of the greatest episodes of AEW Dynamite was the memorial show that was dedicated to Brody Lee. Still absolutely horrific that he did pass away so young. And during that show, Big Red, also known as Eric Rowan, also known as Luke Harper's long-term tag team partner, did come to the ring. My gosh, he gave him one hell of an emotional farewell. If you got through this without crying, you are stronger than me. The conversation then became whether or not he was going to get signed by All Elite Wrestling, and as we know today, the answer is no. He's back in the WWE as part of the Wyatt Six. However, if you do go back to Revolution 2022, from nowhere, Redbeard was back in the company. As it turned out, he was going to be Death Triangle's third man as they tangled with the House of Black. Where did that come from? It was a very last-minute decision after Ray Phoenix had broken his arm, so it wasn't the worst choice in the world, but it was just a bit like, well, why did we get Eric? And once again, is he going to be signed full-time? And the answer once again was no. Still, though, it all worked out in the end, and I do have to say this. Eric Rowan is vastly underrated. That man is huge and yet can move around the ring like he's a cruiserweight. I mean, that's a mild exaggeration, but he deserves much more praise, so let's send it to him right now. Number 8, Kushida. Kushida is an awesome professional wrestler, which he did prove during his run in NXT, as he also did in his run in Japan before that, and now he's back in Japan being awesome again. You can also find him in TNA, and yet on the 18th of January 2023 broadcast of Dynamite, he walked in and challenged Darby Allin for the TNT Championship. They had an awesome 13-minute match as well, which if you do care, the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer gave 4 stars to. Once again, it was just a great reminder. Oh yeah, Kushida, he's always been really good. He also kind of felt like a guy that AEW would sign, but once again, this didn't happen. Although now if we do look at the roster, it is way too stacked. I'd be a little worried he got lost in the shuffle. Incredibly, he is now 41 years of age as well, and yet seems to get better with every single 12 months that does pass. I do wonder if he ever will come back to a WWE, or maybe even pop up in AEW again. The only way to find out, my friends, is to keep watching. I've oversold that, and I'm very sorry. Number 7, Aubrey Edwards. Now, of course, Aubrey Edwards is very well known to professional wrestling fans, because from day one, she has been a referee. Somebody there must have decided, you know what would be fun when a June 2023 episode of Rampage rolled around? Well, she could be a surprise opponent in a match. I have to say this, it irked some people because they don't know how to have fun. I thought this was a delight. Because of all the things, she was teaming with Mark Briscoe and his papa to take on Jeff and Karen Jarrett, who also had Jay Lethal. I mean, this was one of the most ridiculous matches you'd be able to fathom with your brain. It only went about 9 minutes and 45 seconds, and Aubrey even smashed Jay Lethal over the head with a guitar. And once again, I understand that goofy wrestling may not be for you, but go and look how much fun they're having and how much fun the fans are having. That's the whole point of sports entertainment. You're meant to have a good time. It also actually paid off a feud because Karen Jarrett and Aubrey Edwards had fallen out a couple of weeks before this. So doing something for someone that had been there since the day we were born, well, why the flub not, man? We get so much professional wrestling in a calendar year. If you can pull something crazy out your butt, Just do it. Number 6, Marco Stunt. Now we all know once again when AEW did start that Marco Stunt was an important part of it. His group with Jack Perry and Luchasaurus makes you feel all warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum. It was just a wholesome act. Very sadly, when his deal expired in May 2022, it wasn't renewed, and after that, Marco did go through some horrific injuries which actually forced him to retire in 2024. He definitely made the right decision because he could have been paralyzed, so all the best to that guy. He seems like a nice man. 6 months before that, though, as Jack Perry was doing his TNT Championship Open Challenge, do you know who answered it and made the crowd go, well, hot damn? Obviously, the answer is Marco Stunt. And this was actually really enjoyable as well because by this point, AEW was able to do that with performers all the way back from 2019. That just underlines how long they have been around, even though it only felt like yesterday. He wasn't able to win because of course he wasn't, but this was just a nice thing to do when it comes to nostalgia. And everybody loves that in the modern day. Don't pretend you don't. In fact, wrestling has built an entire industry on it. So let's just send all our best to Marco Stunt because he was a very unique performer in a business that's hard to be unique in. It's a shame he wasn't able to keep going, but once again, health and happiness first and foremost. There is nothing more important than that. Number 5, the Impractical Jokers. So this one actually made me smile because I've been watching the Impractical Jokers probably for around a decade now. I find those guys really funny. The Tenderloins Quartet have also been very vocal about how much they do love professional wrestling, which is why every now and then they do turn up on professional wrestling shows. This one was on a February 2023 broadcast of Rampage when they walked out, made some jokes about their penises, when Chris Jericho and his brand new set of friends came out and threw them through a table. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? I suppose you don't care about getting sued. This was the Jericho Appreciation Society who did destroy Brian Quinn and James Murray. And while this didn't really tie into any programs that we were doing, you'd have to imagine it got some news somewhere. That's the only reason you bring celebrities in. You want to grab some headlines and hope someone goes, well, hi, I like that television show. Maybe I'll watch this AEW. Maybe it didn't work so much for UK fans, but once again, it did for me. I think that lot is very humorous. Probably could have found a better way to say that. Number 4, David Finlay. So this was David Finlay's solitary AEW appearance, and of course, if you want to see him work even more, you should tune into New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's like a major dude over there. I think the main reason we did this on the 8th of June 2022 episode of Dynamite was just to let you know, oh my gosh, AEW and New Japan do have a Forbidden Door pay-per-view, which means that wrestlers from each company are going to fight, and I wonder what that would look like. Well, you found out here, because Hangman Adam Page took on Finlay, and of course the Cowboy won. I wouldn't say it was either man's best performance, but again, this was more about gimmick and the novelty of the whole thing. And maybe, just maybe, if you weren't pumped up for the big show that was around the corner, this did a good job in advertising it right into your face. What? Given this was 2 years ago as well, David Finlay has got way better now. Given what history has taught us, he probably will end up in AEW or WWE at some point. Probably shouldn't talk about this. Don't mean that in a bad way. It's just a lot of nothing. A lot of people were like, David Finlay is here? And no one ever really explained why. Number 3, Sabu. So I was there live for Double or Nothing 2023 in Vegas. And when Sabu came out, I was like, how the hell did we get here? This was also the night where we had the 4 Pillars match, as well as that crazy Anarchy in Arena. And yes, it was the unsanctioned match between Adam Cole and Chris Jericho, which didn't age terribly well. I suppose to try and add something extra in there, Tony Khan did book Sabu as its guest enforcer. And even now, where we turn back the clock, I don't understand how we justified this. Sabu doesn't tie in with either guy. It then got even more bizarre because Sabu just decided to engage in a steel chair tussle with Chris Jericho. And when he fell through the ropes and smashed through a table, eventually he pulled himself up onto his feet and he just left, meaning Aubrey Edwards was now back in control. And also, once again, we're back at question time. Why the flub did we book Sabu to begin with? Now, if you do go out there are some hints that maybe this didn't go to plan in terms of backstage happenings, but we don't know that, so we shall leave it there. But honestly, everything to do with this was just utterly nuts, and I'm not sure I'm ever gonna get it. Number 2, Kevin Thorne. This was very, very weird. Kevin Fertig was a tenured performer during WWE's Ruthless Aggression era, who actually found fame with two very specific personalities. He was Mordecai on SmackDown, then over in the brand new ECW, he was Kevin Thorne. While I'm always happy for a wrestler to get an opportunity because everybody deserves a payday, when we were doing a December 2022 Rampage match between QT Marshall and Orange Cassidy, they decided to have some lumberjacks, one of which was indeed Kevin Thorne, and yes, he was dressed like the vampire, which was the gimmick that he used to play. Now you think we would have tried to tie this into a narrative, but we didn't do it. Instead, after the fact, we found out that Kevin lived in the area, so somebody had just invited him down. So look, good for him, I hope he had a terrific time, but in terms of cameos, this one didn't make any sense. We hadn't seen him in years. Also, after the fact, he was gone again. So in terms of the law of wrestling, what the flub is he doing now? Number 1, Greg the Hammer Valentine. We go to the 7th of October 2020 AEW Dynamite here, where Chris Jericho was celebrating his 30th anniversary. Seems fair enough. The man's been going at it 3 decades. He should have a party. As we know, any shindig needs some special guests as well, so Shaquille O'Neal popped up, Lars Ulrich from Metallica, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley from Kiss, and then given that we were knee-deep in the pandemic, who was just randomly sitting in the stands? I'm sure you've worked out it was Greg the Hammer Valentine. Now on this same night, Cody Rhodes and Brody Lee were tussling over the TNT title in that now famous dog collar match. And of course, Valentine had basically made that famous in 1983 when he went at it with Roddy Piper. So I do understand the tie-in here, but once again, go and watch this and you will just see Greg sat in a lone seat looking quite sad. It's like, shouldn't you be happy to be here, Hammer? I don't think he was at all. In fact, it almost looks like he was going to fall asleep. Ever since then, I hope Greg has been able to get his 8 hours, but yes, I understand that he's a legend within the wrestling industry. But did he need to be here? And did it add anything? I've asked my brain, and I've asked others too, and we all believe the answer is no. Know of any other crazy cameos that AEW has done over its existence? Make sure you let us know in the comments below before you like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Then do please click the video on the screen to learn even more about professional wrestling. But otherwise, my friends, thank you for stopping by as always, and I will talk to you again soon.